Hello, welcome to Bible Study. This week I'd like to share some thoughts on Daniel chapter 3. You might have noticed that Daniel is missing in this chapter. The last verse of chapter 2 explains to us why. Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego were appointed by the king to responsibilities in Babylon. So they were among the provincial officials summoned by Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 3, while Daniel was at the king's court. This was a testing time for Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. They were brave. They refused to worship the golden statue. They were respectful to the king. They worked for the king. But there was something they could not do, and that was to worship something or someone else apart from God. They only worshipped God. When Christians have been persecuted and killed, it has often been because of their refusal to worship anyone or anything else besides God. But then I ask myself, how often do I worship other things? Have you ever heard yourself saying, I know this isn't what God wants, I know I shouldn't do this, but how else will I get a boyfriend? How else will I keep my job? How else will I have this holiday? How else will I make enough money? How often do we prioritize other things until there is not much space left in life for God? And how often do we try to be so agreeable that we accept all beliefs, instead of remembering that we follow Jesus, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Are these our times of trial? And do we say, no, I won't do this. I will choose God's way. He will provide a holiday, money, job, boyfriend. But if not, I will still follow him. Whatever it costs me, he is worth it. Jesus himself was tempted to meet his needs in his own way, without waiting for his Father, when the devil tempted him to turn stones into bread. He was tempted to demand God's help instead of trusting, when Satan tempted him to throw himself off the temple. And he was tempted to serve God the easy way, without the pain and suffering. But he resisted. What makes it hard for us, says Brennan Manning, is our lack of faith, our fears and insecurities, our need to manage our own lives and those of others, our little plans to which we cling so tightly. But Hebrews 4 tells us that Jesus understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same testings that we do, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it most. Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego made their choice, whatever what was going to happen next. They did not know that God would save them. They did not know what God would do. They knew that God is our rescuer. They knew he could save them from going into the fire. But they didn't know for certain that he would. And he didn't. They were thrown into the fire. But Jesus walked in the fire with them, and they came out unharmed. If they had acted out of self-preservation and bowed down, they would have avoided the fire, but they would have been harmed. They would have damaged their relationship with God, their self-respect, their integrity, and they would have felt that loss perhaps for the rest of their lives. when we fail to be brave, when we choose to protect ourselves and meet our needs instead of following God's wisdom, when we choose something else over God, we may avoid the immediate pain and hurt, but we do much more harm to ourselves. Walking with God may mean suffering, but we will be whole. In her book, Journey into God's Heart, Jennifer Rees-Larkham writes about the distress she felt when her husband left her. For the last 5 years, I had been waving my faith at the Lord like a demand notice. Give Tony back or else. And I will read a little extract from her book. That evening, my Bible portion was Daniel chapter 3, and as I began to read, I suddenly saw myself as a child of 6, back in our nursery at Hildenborough Hall. Nanny was making toast for our tea, holding the bread against the bars of the gas fire with a long toasting fork, while Otti told us the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "Make the fiery furnace even hotter!" Otti was shouting as she stood on her chair impersonating the Emperor Nebuchadnezzar with a tea cosy on his head. "And you 3 will be thrown into the flames if you don't bow down and worship my gods. Forget your silly old God. You'll soon see he won't be able to deliver you out of my hand." By this time, our eyes were round with awe while Nanny let the toast burn. "Our God can save us," replied Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "But if not, even if he doesn't, we'll still worship him and no one else." Of course, we knew exactly what would happen next because we asked for the story so often, but we still savoured its delicious end. Even though they were thrown into the fierce heat, they walked about in the flames without even being singed, not even their tunics, trousers and turbans, because there was someone else in the furnace with them. "It was Jesus!" we shrieked. Don't ever forget the bit where they said, "But if not," Otti always concluded. God is powerful enough to save us from all the horrid things of life, but if not, even if he doesn't, he is always there with us, right in the hottest part of the fire. As my memory faded, Otti was still wagging her finger in my direction and saying, "Don't you ever forget that, Jen." But I had forgotten. I'd been so busy trying to force him to take the flames away that I had missed the joy of his company in the flames. Thank you for listening. Bye.